Welcome, everyone. This year has obviously been one of the most difficult in modern history in so many ways. Between the pandemic, quarantine, politics, race relations, looting, it's been an exceptionally challenging year. This difficulty has been a major stressor on organizations and people, but has also underscored the importance of strong leadership. Today's panel will explore how leaders have worked through these difficult times and how to come out stronger on the other side. I'd like to introduce the moderator for the panel, Michelle Mason. She's president and CEO of Association Forum. Michelle has run the Association Forum for the last 6 years, following her time with ASAE, the Center for Association Leadership, and the American Society for Quality. She's also served as adjunct faculty at Mount Mary and Strayer Universities. Please enjoy Managing Through Uncertainty.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much for that introduction. And it is a pleasure to be here with you today. We are definitely living in unprecedented times, and so it does require strong leadership to help our organizations and our members through the whole process. So we're going to hear later from Jon Hockman regarding our welcoming environment research. Before we get started, I want to give a little background on welcoming environment. In 2015, the Association Forum Board of Directors approved welcoming environment as a strategic imperative. And that really means that the board was very interested in expanding the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion to focus on inclusion, recognizing that both are equally as important. We define welcoming environment as the creation of an environment that installs a sense of belonging and connectedness that engages individuals in a unique manner. An environment in which uniqueness is valued, respected, and supported through opportunities and interaction. We know that welcoming the thoughts and ideas of others from diverse backgrounds now more than ever before is important. It will help us to navigate the challenging times that Tim mentioned earlier, and also come up with or develop new and creative ways to prepare our businesses for the foreseeable future. So with that, I am going to now introduce Jon Hockman, a principal at McKinley Advisors, who will walk you through research that Association Forum partnered with McKinley to conduct. We knew that to advance this concept through the association community, it was very important for us to help our members make evidence-based decisions and also provide tools and resources to implement welcoming environments within their organizations. So Jon is going to provide us with a high level of welcoming environment. Welcome, Jon.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, and good to be with you today. Let me pull up some slides that will help me speak to some of the issues here. But a little bit of context first. My firm, McKinley Advisors, partnered with Association Forum to do this research earlier in the calendar year. Specifically, we did an electronic survey in late February and early March. I think that timing is important because it was earlier in the year. And in this study, we partnered with 12 association organizations and talked to more than 5,000 of their members and over 200 members of staff. And the distinction between members and staff will be important at different times as I share as well. So we've got three key messages that I want to share with you today. One is we now have definitive evidence that we have significant problems as it relates to welcoming environments in the association community in particular. Two, we know better. In other words, what we ought to be doing to address those things is not consistently what we are doing in our organizations. And three, we've got some very specific guidance on what to do next. And so let me begin to talk through those results a little bit here. First thing we learned is, as I said, we've got real problems. But what does that mean? First statistic, 44% of members say that they have seen or personally experienced an incident of discrimination, bias, or harassment in the last year. So this is going on. And of those 44%, fully a quarter, 25%, have seen or experienced it personally in the last month. So this is very much real in people's lives. Two, fewer than 50% of members are satisfied with the levels of inclusion that they're experiencing in their workplace. So distinction here, it's not about their association experience, it's about where they work. And yet the second sentence is based on a stat. More than 90% of those members told us that inclusion was among the very most important variables they would look for in seeking out an employer. So among the most important things they're looking for, and fewer than half are actually finding it. We've got an issue. Not surprisingly, but again, evidence that shows that the impact of discrimination and exclusion are falling disproportionately on those who are historically marginalized. And you see the stats here on the slide, whether it's gender, whether it's age cohort, race and ethnicity, or physical ability. Certain audiences are having a much higher prevalence of exclusion and discrimination than others. And it's not rare. We may sometimes encounter folks who say, well, yeah, that happens, but not in our organization, or not, that doesn't happen very much anymore. And here's a set of data that tell us that it is, that whether it's your socioeconomic status, your age, or your race and ethnicity, significant numbers are saying that those factors hit them on a daily basis. So not once in a while, but on a daily basis, almost a third by socioeconomic status, a quarter for race and ethnicity, and just under a quarter for age cohort. So this isn't rare at all. Next thing we found is that our leadership is not sufficiently diverse. This probably doesn't surprise us, but we heard very clearly from both members and staff that neither boards of directors nor C-suite people are sufficiently representative. So we've got a real leadership problem as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion going forward. So we've got problems. But we also found in this study that we know better. And what do I mean by that? Well, we asked, in this case, members to show the relative importance of a number of elements that would go into creating a welcoming environment. And you see that list. I know it's small font, but you see a list here. And these blue bars represent the relative level of importance that members assigned to each one of those variables, if you will. Then we asked, what is your satisfaction level with what your organization is actually doing for each of these variables? And what you see in the red bars here is that level of satisfaction, and significant gaps between what we're told is important and what level of satisfaction with what's actually going on. So when we talk about we know better, we have very clear guidance here of the things that our members, and I will tell you, preview on the next slide, staff felt very similarly, what's important, and that's not what we're doing, or not in satisfactory ways. So lest anyone say, I'm not sure what we ought to be doing here, here's some very clear evidence that there are things that are important that we're not fulfilling expectations around. So again, this is members, but I can also show you, this is the staff list. And while the order of items on the screen is slightly different, what we see is the exact same pattern of a significant gap between importance and satisfaction with what's actually occurring in the workplace. And while I won't share the slide here, I will say that we asked members to do the same exercise, speaking about their own places of employment, and had the same pattern again. So whether it's in the association, at the staff level or the members level, or in others places of work, we see the same. We're not doing what we ought to be doing on a consistent basis. But that wasn't really satisfying enough. So we said, well, let's talk more granularly about some very concrete things that we could be doing, because one of the things that Michelle has been so helpful in framing this work from the beginning is that we're doing this study not to have more rhetoric, but to drive action. And we recognize that folks are at different places on their journey. So different organizations and different human beings are somewhere in a journey around diversity, equity, and inclusion. What we wanted to understand were some very specific things folks could find to do, to take action around, no matter where they were on their journey. So something for everybody, if you will. So I want to share these findings briefly about what to do now. First thing is, we've got some work to do to raise awareness beyond the basics. What this slide is showing us is levels of familiarity with different elements of a welcoming environment. And what you see at the top is pretty strong familiarity with some of the core building blocks here, whether it's race and ethnicity or gender or the familiar elements here. But when you get down to the bottom, you see things like marginality, allyship, intersectionality. These are important concepts, and I suspect maybe even many of you may not be familiar with some of those concepts yet. We definitely found in our research that there was much less familiarity there. And if we're really going to make a difference in these conversations, we need to help grow understanding of sort of all the components that go into this conversation going forward. So we've got some work to do. The next thing I want to do is talk about inclusion. And Michelle has oftentimes said that it all starts with inclusion. And we definitely found some very strong messages in the research about inclusion. And so here, 54% of members do not feel that inclusive behaviors are a part of their association's day-to-day activities. And basically the same percentage, 49% of staff felt that way. So almost 50% of staff and over 50% of members feel like our behaviors are not inclusive on a day-to-day basis. 42% of staff feel their association doesn't create opportunities for people of different backgrounds to engage with their events. And 48% of members felt the same. We have got to do a better job of making sure that everybody feels welcome in our organizations. Seems like a simple concept, but the evidence here is that we're not getting it done basically half of the time. So we got to work on inclusion. That's a very specific action that we could take. Second thing, we've got to have better ways for people to speak up when they see or experience issues. You recall earlier I said 44% of members had experienced or witnessed an incident of bias, discrimination, or harassment in the last year. This slide is telling us 42% of those folks don't even feel comfortable saying anything about it. And 28% of staff don't feel comfortable. So if we're ever going to address the incidents, we have to help create safe and accessible ways for folks to speak up and report what they're experiencing or witnessing. Concrete action item. Next thing, we've got a hiring issue. 41% of staff cited the lack of a diverse, qualified talent pool for their hiring needs. Now, whether this is the result of not looking hard enough for diverse, qualified talent, or the need to build a pipeline of more diverse and qualified talent, and I've definitely heard that from some hiring managers that there's a pipeline problem, there's an action item here that we've got to make sure that we've got access to and evidence of diverse, qualified talent pools to meet our staffing needs. That's one element of HR, but there are some broader HR issues. This is another one of the gap analysis charts. And you see here that, again, there's significant difference between the relative importance that is assigned to some of these elements of HR versus satisfaction with what's actually happening. Now, we don't in this study, we're not suggesting that diversity and inclusion is a HR problem. HR is the connection with our people, and people are at the center of welcoming environments. So there's a dimension here. And so whatever your organization is doing, whether it's clear and equitable promotion processes or allyship programs, there's some specific things that could be done through an HR lens to help foster these kinds of environments. We also had evidence here that this was not sufficiently prioritized, both from a strategic priority standpoint and dedication of time. And there's probably a causal link there. Hopefully your time is being spent on the things that you're saying are strategically important. But over a third of the time, this has not been put forward as a strategic priority. Again, I will admit that this was evidence gathered in February and March. And I would like to believe that after this summer, those answers might be different, that it would be a higher priority. Even if they are, we need to ensure that they're not temporary priorities, that they're sustained and durable priorities for organizations at a strategic level. The other thing we heard is just this long list of open-ended statements of things that members specifically were asking us to do in our organizations. And I'll go back to the journey analogy from earlier. Members are not suggesting that every organization must do everything on this screen. Rather, they were suggesting no matter where you are in your journey, there's something that you could be doing. And we asked this same question of staff and got very similar answers. So while the order might be slightly different, again, we got some very specific things that we can do. So the last point I'll make before I hand it back to Michelle is that we heard in this study very, very clear messages to do something. Wherever your organization may be, please do something to advance welcoming environments. So with that, as a quick synopsis, Michelle, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, John, so much. Thanks for sharing the research findings. We also know before we transition to our panelists that when you don't feel welcomed, right, we don't feel a sense of inclusion, our members and sometimes our staff result to covering. And when we talk about covering, it's really downplaying or hiding certain aspects of yourself to assimilate, to fit in. So we look forward to digging deeper into that topic. And as we release the welcoming environment research over the coming months. Well, I'm excited to pivot, and I know that's Kim's favorite word these days. I'm excited to pivot to our panelists. And before we get started, I'll ask Kim Mosely and Kimberly Bears to both introduce themselves. Kim?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly Mosely. I go by Kim. I'm the president of the American Specialty Toy Retailing Association. Our organization is a trade organization for people who run toy stores. So think in terms of your local neighborhood toy store. Those folks are our members, as well as manufacturers, everyone from the Mattels and Hasbros of the world, all the way down to some of the smaller manufacturers that maybe you've not heard of. We also have sales reps and sales rep groups that are members of our organization that rep toys, games, and other juvenile products. That's a little bit about me.
Great, thank you, Kim. Kimberly?
Oh, hi, and thanks. And I do go by Kimberly, so that's how you'll know the difference between Kim and myself on today's call. The Magnificent Mile Association has been in existence since 1912. It was created in response to Daniel Burnham's 1909 Plan of Chicago. And so for 108 years, our association has shepherded that plan and has cultivated or curated what we now know as the Magnificent Mile on Michigan Avenue. It's no accident that that avenue resembles the Champs-Élysées of Paris, because that's how Daniel Burnham designed it. The association has 650 members. It certainly did pre-COVID. We'll see how that shakes out going forward. and represent some of the best of Chicago. When you think of the best attractions, museums, hotels, experiences, dining in Chicago, those are either in our district or are our members. And so it's a little bit about the association.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Kim and Kimberly. Looking very much forward to the conversation we're going to have. So let's start with Kim, your reactions to the welcoming environment research, and how do you see this impacting your organization?
I'm very excited by the research results, not surprised by what I think I heard. I do believe that what Jon said about we knew this all along. I think that's very true. I think there was a sentiment maybe that that's just the way it is, and I think we've gotten away from that. I think what's happened recently with racial unrest and some of the rioting and protests are people expressing that things need to change and expressing that this is the time for change. So I'm not surprised by the research results, and I'm very optimistic. I'm going to put it that way. Optimistic by the way the United States right now is really looking at what can we do to address some of the disparities that exist and make changes, lasting changes that will make things better.
Okay, thank you. Kimberly, what are your reactions, and how do you see this impacting welcoming environment impacting your organization?
I agree with Kim that it buttresses the argument that many of us have been making for a long time, which is that diversity matters, inclusion matters, and it matters very directly to our bottom line. I mean, if we are talking about having healthy associations that are growing, associations that are providing value, are relevant, and are doing the work needed in today's world. This to me is more ammunition to say it matters. Who is in the room? Who is at the table? Who is around that table as conversations are happening? All of that deeply matters to those that we might want to hire as employees or staff, and to those that we want to join our associations. So I think this is fantastic. Very welcomed.
Great. Thank you both. We know based on research that McKinsey has conducted, diversity matters. And also to your point, Kimberly, when you have diverse perspectives around the table, you have a greater sense of new ideas, creativity, innovation. It does have an economic bottom line impact. And that's the business case. The business case now is more robust than ever before. So thank you both for your insights there. So how have retail members from both of your organizations stayed relevant and adapted to the new business landscape caused by COVID-19? Kim, let's start with you.
Well, you mentioned at the very beginning of our call, pivot is one of my favorite words. And that's because that's what I think we're all doing. Toy stores have done the same thing. Retail toy stores have pivoted to online sales. They are now also taking advantage of curbside deliveries. Some of our toy stores are also doing local deliveries. In addition to that, they've set up some very, very interesting partnerships. I can share with you, we've had one toy store that has partnered with a local school as part of the food giveaways that the school was doing over the summer. They partnered with that school to also include some toys and games and puzzles as part of what was being given away. We have another retailer that partnered with a local children's museum and was able to put together some bundles, some packages that made a way for parents and caregivers to provide a way for kids to stay busy over the summer as part of a package that was coming from the museum that included some discovery kinds of items in addition to some toys and games that were coming from the local toy store. So pivot is like our favorite word here in the toy side of the world, because even though we were all over the summer shelter in place and not able to go to your local toy store, it was still very important for parents and caregivers to provide a way for kids to play and continue to learn and grow, which is part of what they do when they play.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim. How about you, Kimberly?
Yeah, I agree with Kim that her members and mine are entrepreneurs. And there are no smarter people on the planet than entrepreneurs. They will find a way to persist, to survive, and to thrive against all odds. And that's exactly what we've seen with our members. By hook or by crook, they too they started doing curbside. They started doing delivery. They were packaging their 3-star, 4-star meals and finding ways to connect with customers. They were deploying all kinds of safety protocols, COVID-19 protocols. You saw the hotel industry completely turn itself inside out and put into place all kinds of high-tech, low-touch protocols and procedures that go to assuring people that they are going to be safe. We've seen all of our museums and attractions, from Shedd Aquarium to Brookfield Zoo, the Museum of Contemporary Art, the Art Institute. They've all found ways to connect with members and, in fact, get new members while people are, as Kim said, home with their kids, trying to find ways to entertain their kids, to link what is going on in the world with, with curricula that makes sense for different age groups. I know my Zoom backgrounds come from the Museum of Contemporary Art because I love, and they've made those things available. So one last thing, our boat attractions, the boat companies, one of them has rebranded themselves as a floating rooftop. It's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So that is not to say that this has been a great season for anyone. I mean, I think what you have to acknowledge is, in the midst of great adversity, entrepreneurs will find a way to persist. All of us are looking forward to being able to do things in a safer world, in a space where we can come together and enjoy one another's company. I don't know if that will be first quarter next year, second quarter. But in the meantime, just like Kim's members, ours are finding all kinds of new ways to make it.
Kimberly, let's stay with you for a moment. We know that many of your retailers were forced to close during some of the unrest that was experienced on Mag Mile. How are they planning to come back? How are they changing up their approach?
Well, many of them are still closed. And we were just having this conversation on a staff call last week in terms of finding ways to help them open, on a case-by-case basis. Each retailer has its own approach. Each brand has its own personality. And some have decided to keep the boards up. They are open, but they're open behind their boards. They want to have a sense that they won't need to replace their glass. They won't need to replace their inventory a third or fourth time. So it's very much an individual approach, or an individual corporate approach. But there really is such a desire to reopen and to fully re-engage with their customers, with the avenue, with the city. So we'll be working with each of them and all of them on those reopenings.
Great, thank you. Well, we wish both of your members well, and we love to see Mag Mile come back, and we definitely will support your members in that pursuit. So thank you for the work you're doing there. Okay, it's no question that these are hard times for our members, but COVID-19 has also taken a toll on our staff and team members. How do you keep your team motivated and excited to work when we're all working from home and there's less team synergy? So we'll start with Kim.
That's a tough one, Michelle. I have to admit that it's sometimes difficult to connect with people remotely. There is a challenge there. One of the things that staff and I are trying to be very careful about is the old-fashioned term work-life balance. I'm going to rephrase that as personal time versus work time. Working from home does give you some flexibility. I was sharing with someone, I can run downstairs and throw a load in the laundry, in the washer if I need to, that sort of thing. But it can lead to a situation where you realize it's 7 p.m. and you're still sitting at your computer. I have found myself sitting at the computer and the sun has gone down. So one of the conversations that I've had with staff is finding those boundaries and respecting those boundaries and respecting one another's boundaries. So even if I am working until 6, there's no meetings after 5 o'clock, there's no meetings before 9 a.m. So sort of recognizing everyone's boundaries. The other thing that we do is there's a tool that we use called Slack. Slack lets you set your begin time, your end time, and can alert others that you are now offline. That gives me an opportunity to download, from my brain at least, download something that I just thought of and share that on Slack, but I don't have to worry about that hitting their inbox until they are back online. So it sort of just sits there without interrupting their downtime. The other thing is, because we are about toys and play, we try to get together and do some toys and do some games. And there are some games that you can do online that gives you a time to just kind of have some fun together. We've had a couple of times when we shared a bottle of wine remotely together. So it's important for kids to play, but it's also important for adults to play. So we do try to do that from time to time.
Kim, you're certified in play, right?
I am a certified play expert. It's a certification that talks about the science behind play, the chemicals that are released in your brain and in your body, and how important that is for good child development.
Yeah, that certification is definitely required now as we all try to understand the new realities that we're facing. Kimberly, how about you? What's happening in your organization with your staff, and what tips can you share with the audience today?
Well, I'm glad that Kim took that question first. So I can do a lot of what she said. And we have standing meetings. We have a standing all staff meeting, not every day, but once a week. And we do a round robin in that meeting, and each person will say what's happening in their work world. We also spend some time talking about what's happening in people's personal lives to the extent that they want to share and they want to be connected. We have recognized, just in an HR perspective, we recognize that people are not taking vacation time. You know, with a shelter in place, there's like, well, where does one go? How can one play outside one's apartment, balcony, 4 walls, yard, block, whatever? So we are starting to encourage people to take some time off, which we say to folks, almost like the bar, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Right.
and just say, people, we've got to encourage as managers and as stewards of people that folks do some self-care. And there's also some lead by example, I think, as Kim was saying. The times when we as CEOs find ourselves working late nights and weekends, we too have to be able to say, I need a break. I need to get this work done, but I need to live to fight another day. And I would say maybe the last thing is that it can be incredibly difficult to find a sense of excitement, find a sense of accomplishment when, frankly, there are days when we are all just working so hard and accomplishing so little. there is a real difference in what our accomplishments are these days versus what they have been in the past. For us to put as much effort and energy as we do into, a project now, with that same energy, we would have had maybe 5,000, 10,000 people on the avenue. Today, that might be, oh, look, we had 100 people come to a webinar or a virtual experience. It's a real reset. And I think it can play with one's mind. So the idea that we're all working so hard. I mean, Michelle, when you asked about the reopening, we're working really hard to reopen. And this is after a second or third experience of having property damage and inventory decimated. It's very hard to say, wow, let's go order some more plate glass again. So just giving ourselves some space to feel our feelings and, and give folks time. I think there's so much that is happening on the emotional and the spiritual and psychological side of this that always impacts work. But this is, we talk about unprecedented times. We could just say in times never before experienced, there's no playbook. There is so little to know about what we're going through. And there's so little ability to predict what the future will hold. So, really taking it a day at a time, a week at a time, and everyone knowing that they are doing their best to keep it together and to do it with grace. And that's about all we can really ask for.
Great. Thank you. I say often, Kimberly, we're writing the playbook while we're playing the game. So that's a real thing that we're addressing. Kim, you use the word grace a lot because it is about grace. It's about that space and giving the team the place because we know that mental well-being is very important during this time. Okay, so
Absolutely. I try to remember to always start with, how are you? Because it's very important. How are you?
How are you? That question means a lot these days. Okay, well, let's talk about planning for the rest of the year in 2021. As we are approaching Q4 in just a few weeks, how are each of you planning for the future? Are there any tactics or strategies you're using? Marketing, budgeting, staff, meetings? Kimberly, let's start with you.
Well, this ties to one of our biggest events, the Lights Festival. So the BMO Harris Magnificent Mile Lights Festival is an event that we planned for, almost 12 months out of the year, but for sure a good solid 9 months. And for so long, this event was unknown. We weren't sure what phase we were going to be in. We left our offices Friday, March 13th, Friday the 13th. And at the time, I don't know, how you all felt, but I thought, well, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. That was it's almost 6 months ago. We were really happy that we finally have a plan for that event, and that has created some ease in amongst the staff, that we've finally landed on what is going to work, and I can talk more about that. But that was a major question for us. We also had to do a lot of reshuffling financially. I talked about 650 members pre-COVID. We will send our billing out toward the end of this year. That'll give us a sense of where we are in 21. But making it, we now can see the end at the light of the tunnel, at least, or we can see our way to finishing the year. In terms of cash on hand and what we think is going to come in the door. And it has allowed everyone to breathe a bit of a sigh of relief. And having things to look forward to, not just treading water, but feeling like you're actually making some progress has helped. And again, I think we have some some projects on the board, and we are making some forward progress. And I think those things really help.
Yeah, for sure. Kimberly, you alluded to your plans for the future. Care to share what those plans are?
I do, right. Well, talk about pivot. We've transitioned to a TV show, so it's going to be a TV special aired by ABC7. It'll be aired all across the states and into Canada. And we're looking at some really fantastic Chicago talent, which has been something that we've wanted to do. But you know, when we're sheltering in place and we're trying to keep travel to a minimum, it makes all the sense in the world to look to our homegrown stars, and so we're going to do that. And you know, we talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion, of course, Michelle, with your research, welcoming environment. When I started, it's just been a year. I just celebrated my 1 year anniversary. Heck of a year to you know, have under my belt. But we started working on diversity, equity, and inclusion a year ago in September. And I'm really, really proud of what we're doing with the Lights Festival. We're tying the downtown event to the neighborhoods of Chicago. So we're going to find ways to activate in brown and black neighborhoods in Chicago and to share some of the love. You know, one of the things that we knew a year ago was that we needed to break the old division between downtown and the neighborhoods as us versus them, which isn't true and doesn't work. And so you're going to see some of that really, I think, play out beautifully in what we have planned.
Wow, that sounds exciting. You know what they say, not waste a good crisis. So you definitely,
Exactly.
definitely showing the innovation there. We're really excited to look forward to what you have in store for us. So thank you for sharing, Kimberly. Kim.
Well, for us, our annual trade show was 60% of our revenue, and we had to cancel that this year. It was in June of this year. So as you can imagine, there was a huge financial impact to that. So we had to, there's my word again, pivot. There were a lot of changes that we had to make to our financial picture. There were a lot of changes that we had to make to that offering. We turned it into a virtual offering, and we were able to do a virtual trade show in August. It was branded under Astra Summer Camp. So our exhibitors all had campsites, and our attendees could go to the campsite. They could buy t-shirts at the trading post. They could go to the gathering spot, which was tied to our Facebook group, and have fun. We had contests. We had the best s'mores recipe. We had some gardening. We had all kinds of fun things. We had yoga sometimes. So we had a lot of fun with that. Of course, pivoting. I'm so glad, Kimberly, that you mentioned how much a lot of work doesn't necessarily produce the way it used to, because we ran into that as well. What we were able to do was very well received. It didn't get us nearly the kinds of revenues that we would have gotten in with an in-person event, and it was just as much work. It felt to me like it was just as much work, maybe even a little bit more. But it was well received. I think our membership really appreciated an opportunity for connecting. And ultimately, our trade show is a chance for business. Sure, it's buyers connecting with manufacturers that have product to sell, but it was also a community event. It was an opportunity for building relationships. It was an opportunity for folks to get together and say hi and hug. And we couldn't do that in person this year. So we did that virtually, and people reported back. We haven't gotten our final survey in the field yet, but people have reported back, at least anecdotally, it was an opportunity to connect. Mm-hmm. It was an opportunity to share. It was an opportunity to see those faces that they missed seeing as part of, they could see them virtually. They weren't able to see them in person. So yes, it was a lot of work, but it didn't kill us. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So it was an opportunity for us to provide our community with an avenue for making those connections, for building those relationships, and for seeing those faces. What are we doing for the future? So our next trade show would be June of 2021. I wish I had a crystal ball, and I wish I could tell you exactly what June of 2021 looks like. But our plan, and at least we were able to start putting together a plan. Our plan is to put together a hybrid event. It is both going to have digital aspects and in-person aspects. And if, as we get closer to June of 2021, it turns out that we don't have an opportunity for an in-person event, we've got a plan for how we're going to pivot those in-person offerings into something digital, or let those folks that have signed up for in-person switch over to a digital equivalent or a digital option. So at least we've got now some plans for putting together a hybrid event for June of 2021.
You know, this crisis, this pandemic, has definitely allowed us to take risks, allowed us to be innovative and creative, but also, you know, I see, at least with my team, a greater sense of confidence with the staff team, particularly after there's been a creative idea implemented. So that feels really good to see them succeed in that way. So thank you for sharing those examples. Here's a question from the audience. How do you navigate vendor and supplier relationships when putting down deposits and discussing contract cancellations due to the pandemic?
I'll start with that question. We've been very lucky as an organization. We did have some reserves, and our board did make the decision to refund those folks that had prepaid, that had put down a down payment for the June trade show for this year. And they had a choice. They could either take a refund, or they could leave their monies in the coffers and use that towards 2021. So even if there were a price increase for 2021, they were locked in, they were prepaid for 2021. And we had about 40% of our exhibitors that chose that option. It was a great show of support for them to leave their monies in the coffers. And in exchange for that, we gave them first priority for the virtual event. And we also highlighted them in our marketing and communications pieces to let folks know how they have supported the organization.
Thank you, Kim. Kimberly?
Well, one of our big events was our annual gala, and that was going to be in May, and that sounds cute now, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Then we pushed it to October, thinking, well, certainly by October this will have been settled and worked out, and of course we've canceled that. So we went back to both those that had already put down deposits for gala tables and said, we're not going to be able to do it this year, but we would be grateful if you would donate that money to the association. And the vast majority of them did that. And we went back to our vendors and said, can you hold our deposit? We'll be back in 21. And we've had really good luck there. So I would say, you know, the vast majority of our members have been in, I mean, I wouldn't say they're in necessarily a terrific financial position, but they value the association enough to take money they don't have and invest it with us. Mm-hmm. And we have really great vendor relationships. We have a vendor who does our a lot of our marketing and website work, search engine optimization, and they have continued to provide a base level of service for us. And we have suspended our monthly retainer payment to them and said, we understand if you can't do it, just don't take our websites down. And they said, no, you are a valued client and you'll be back. So I think that's, you know, what Kim is saying. It really helps to show that you've got some staying power and to say to folks, hey, we can't pay this right now, or we would really appreciate some forbearance right now, but doing this now will allow us to survive. And for us, you know, it's 108 years and counting, and we're not planning on not being around to celebrate our 109th anniversary. You know, by hook or by crook, we will be there and we will celebrate that 109th. So this is, you know, we are too looking ahead and saying, boy, this is a heck of a rough spell, a heck of a rough patch, but you know, this too shall pass, and we will live to, you know, to as Kim said, to connect in person in 21 and give those long awaited hugs and, hold hands and sing together, sing songs of sorrow and songs of joy, but together.
We are very resilient, and we know this too shall pass. So we have to enter this with great optimism, the word that Kim used earlier. And so as we kind of focus on the word that you both like, I like at times, pivot. What is the, in pivoting, what is the greatest lesson you've learned? Or you might, what is the greatest opportunity? Or even it could have been a failure. I mean, we're all new. It's a blank sheet of paper this year, what we're all dealing with. So you can share a success story or maybe something that didn't turn out quite like you anticipated.
I'll do both. I would say one of the most important lessons that I've learned is the importance of giving people grace. And I mean that in that there are times when I feel frustrated or feel overwhelmed, or I'm in conversation with someone and wondering what the heck are they, why are they like that? And one of the things that I've learned is they're just as overwhelmed and frustrated as I am. And to give them the grace to be overwhelmed and frustrated and angry and confused and whatever else I'm running into, and naming that and saying, like I said before, how are you today? Because sometimes people are dealing with what they're dealing with. They've got health concerns, or they've got family members impacted by COVID-19, or they've got something going on with the racial unrest or Black Lives Matters, or they've got the financial impact of the economic downturn or whatever. So to start with grace and to start with what's going on with you. I think one of my biggest failures is to recognize how hard this is for everyone. I am one of those kind of personalities that just sort of pushes through. And I didn't at first give my staff enough recognition of not everybody just pushes through. Some people need to really stop and talk about it and acknowledge it and maybe sad about it or angry about it. So I've learned that I've got to give my staff time to process out loud with me before we sort of buckle down to the business of the work that needs to be done. So that has been a learning for me.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, Kim. Kimberly?
I'll start with where Kim ended, which is mea culpa. Same. I talked about our last day in the office being Friday, March 13th. And for the weekend, I was at a bit of loose ends, knocking about saying, oh, what am I going to do for a whole weekend without, again, thinking that was the worst of that I was going to have to deal with. And so Monday, like, all right, let's go. And I severely underestimated the amount of time that it would take different team members to process what was going on differently. And, and fortunately, I think we have a pretty good open way of communicating on the team. So the team feels comfortable giving me feedback, and they did. And they continue to, and I continue to learn from that. And I'm really trying, the bumper sticker, something like, let me be the person my dog thinks I am. I'm really trying to be the leader that my team needs me to be. And that is different than the leader the board needs me to be, or the leader the public needs me to be, or the leader my members need me to be. And so I think that has been, it's been an incredible learning opportunity, and has stretched me in ways that I didn't expect. The other thing that we have learned is, frankly, how to connect virtually. That was not in our lexicon before this. Every single thing that we did in our association was built on face-to-face in-person interaction, committee meetings, networking events, an annual gala, a parade that draws 1 million people downtown, and the list goes on. And we've had to figure out how to create opportunities for those connections because, we may be in a pandemic, but we are still people and we yearn for connection. It's also been a big learning experience trying to figure out how to connect with folks that I've never met to work on big issues. I was appointed to the Mayor's Recovery Task Force. It was a massive undertaking from the mayor, and I was working with other industry leaders I'd never met before. And we were having conversations about race, about ethnicity, about diversity, about equity, about equality. Really, I mean, such deep issues, and trying to find ways to connect. Those are things that are usually done best in smaller, intimate sessions. We talk about having a safe place. It wasn't any of that, and so that was a big learning experience. But out of this, I think there's been this fantastic opportunity to, Michelle, as you said, to try things and fail, because you're just joining everybody else. Everybody else is trying things and failing. And we as a nonprofit and association, we've not done nearly enough of emulating the tech sector, which is fail fast. When you're talking about trying something new, what do? They try to fail fast, and then they evolve, they transition, they shift. And we just stick with the same things over and over because we're so afraid to, we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to fail. We have so much permission now to try new things, to innovate, to create, to fail, and to learn from that and say, oh, that didn't work, just brush it off and move on. And I think that's really going to serve us well in 21 and beyond.
Thank you for sharing that. This is the moment, we've talked so often about the association business model and needing to change. So this is the year that we can make that happen and learn from it, be resilient, learn from it for sure. We talked about connecting with our teams. We talked about connecting with our members and such. There's a real thing called Zoom fatigue. That's a real thing. So what are you doing to combat that? What are you doing to kind of get yourself through Zoom fatigue, but as well, and your team members as well?
Well, Kim, I'll take this one. You've taken a lot of the questions first, so I'll take this one. We have started to find some places where we can meet outside safely. And that has really helped. It's still nothing like it, excuse me, used to be. We're all distanced, we're in masks, we're kind of shouting at each other in a way to be heard. But there's something really nice just being on the on the back what do I want to say, the back patio of the Museum of Contemporary Art, or being in Pioneer Court, which is at 401 North Michigan. So we're finding places where we can safely gather that again, socially distanced, masked, not exceeding any phase 4 limits. But that I think has been really helpful, and having some business lunches, again, outside on the Riverwalk, and that has helped. That has really cut the Zoom fatigue. Just finding ways to be together.
Thanks, Kimberly. Kim?
I don't think we've found a way to get past the Zoom fatigue. I know that there are times when I stand up for a Zoom meeting versus sitting, because I just can't sit any longer. And I've noticed that some of the team members are doing that too. They're either standing up or they're walking around a little bit. I personally think that we're just at the tip of the iceberg and what we can do with virtual and digital kinds of offerings and digital kinds of meetings. I believe that the future does not include us all sitting passively in front of a camera. I think the future involves us all moving around in front of the camera. In fact, I think some of the newer technologies are going to be cameras that can keep up with you while you're moving around doing things. So I think Zoom fatigue right now is just a byproduct of us trying to do Zoom the way we used to do sitting in meetings together. And I think that's going to change over time, and good. I think it needs to change over time. But I love your idea, Kimberly, of some in-person, socially distanced, masked kind of opportunities. We're hoping that we can do something like that soon. We've got a staff member that lives in another state that's going to be coming to Chicago, and we're going to try to connect in person while she's here with the masks and the social distancing, but we'll at least get a chance to see each other. And I think that's going to be a very good event for the staff.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, particularly as we go into the fall, as we transition to the fall. So you have that one touch point, like you, Kimberly, was Friday, the 13th of March, and the last time I've seen the team. So it'd be great to reconnect. All right, so as we conclude today's discussion, I'd like to thank you both for your insights. Before doing so, any parting thoughts, any closing thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
Sure, I'll go first too again. I want to tie it back to the welcoming environment, and I don't think that we can overstate how important that research is, but the growing awareness that diversity, equity, and inclusion continue to matter. I am the first woman. I've talked about our 108-year history. I'm the first woman who has served as president and CEO. Our board chair is the first person of color. He's African American, and we make that distinction. He's not the first African American. He's the first person of color. So our association started this work. Our board chair was in place when I joined, but we started this work a year or two ago, and it is an evolution. It is a journey. I think, as Jon was saying earlier, it's a journey, and I'm just so hopeful about where that journey leads us as an association and us as a society.
Great, thank you, Kimberly. Kim?
Well, I'll also tie it back to the welcoming environment research. I'm very excited that even though we're looking at a much reduced financial picture for ASTRA, our board and our executive committee are still very committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is still a goal for us. It is still a path that we're following. Of course, we just don't have as much resources that we can apply to it, but even slow and steady wins the race. We still are just as committed, and we're still going to be moving forward with that initiative, despite the fact that there are a number of things that we had to take off of the plate because we've got reduced finances. So that's very exciting for me. The other closing statement is, in addition, you've heard me say a lot about how I've learned to do better at supporting my staff and being the leader that my staff needs. I think the other thing that I've learned that I want to share is take care of yourself. Make space for yourself. Do what you have to do in order to be the leader that you want to be, and not protect yourself, but be there for your staff by taking care of yourself. I think that's more important than ever because we are in a very different time, and it is important that you know what they say on the airplane, you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of any children that you're traveling with, and you just can't be the leader that you want to be without making some time for what you need to do to take care of yourself.
Well, thank you, Kim and Kimberly, today for this wonderful conversation, your insights. I can't think of a better way to end this conversation than what Kim said, and that is take care of yourself. You have to put your oxygen mask on first. So we appreciate you both. Thank you for being strong leaders in our community, and we look forward to definitely the Magmal extravaganza later this year, Kimberly. So please let us know if there's anything we can do to support you. Thank you both.